Hey guys, tonight we begin with something haunting. A time of marble streets, volcanic soil, Roman power, and absolute ignorance. We're diving into what life was really like in Pompeii, that legendary city frozen in time by Mount Vesuvius. Forget the dramatic movie scenes of people running through ash-filled streets. That's the last few hours of a story that spans centuries. The reality is that Pompeii was a thriving, chaotic, absolutely alive city where 79 years after Christ's death, about 15,000 people were living their lives, making their plans, completely unaware that their city would become the most famous archaeological site in human history. So before you get comfy in your bed, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And please tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the globe. Now dim the lights, get under your covers, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's a warm August morning in 79 AD, and you're walking down the Via dell'Abbondanza, Pompeii's main street. The good news, you live in one of the most prosperous cities in the Roman Empire with running water, public baths and entertainment that would make modern Vegas jealous. The bad news, that mountain looming over your city, the one everyone calls Vesuvius, the one covered in vineyards and considered a blessing from Bacchus himself, is actually a volcano that hasn't erupted in human memory. And it's about to wake up in the most catastrophic way imaginable. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, on this particular morning, you have no idea. Nobody does. And that's what makes this story so haunting, because every single person in Pompeii is living a completely normal life, making completely normal plans in a city that has about 17 years left before it ceases to exist. Let's talk about what it actually feels like to wake up in Pompeii. You're in your home, and the first thing you notice is the heat. August in Campania is brutal. We're talking temperatures in the high 80s, low 90s Fahrenheit, with humidity rolling off the nearby Bay of Naples. There's no air conditioning, no ceiling fan, no ice in your water. The most you can hope for is that your house has a good cross breeze and maybe an interior garden, a peristyle where the plants provide some shade and the fountain offers the illusion of coolness. Your bed is nothing like what you're lying in right now. It's a wooden frame with rope or leather straps stretched across it, topped with a thin mattress stuffed with wool or straw. If you're wealthy, maybe you've got feathers. There's no mattress tag, no memory foam, no pillow top, anything. You wake up when the sun comes up because there's no blackout curtains, and honestly, oil lamps are expensive enough that most people go to bed when it gets dark anyway. The sounds of Pompeii wake you before you're fully conscious of it. The city is loud. Merchants are already shouting about their goods. Carts are rumbling over the stone streets, those large stepping stones designed to keep pedestrians above the rivers of waste and rainwater that flow through the streets. Someone's rooster is crowing. A baby is crying. Somewhere someone is hammering metal, the rhythmic clang echoing off the buildings. Dogs are barking. Life in a Roman city doesn't ease into the morning, it crashes into it. You get out of bed, and if you're anyone below the upper classes, you're immediately faced with the reality that your home is small. We're talking maybe 300 square feet for an entire family. One room, maybe two if you're lucky. The walls are plain or cheaply painted. The floor is packed earth or simple concrete. You share this space with your spouse, your children, possibly your parents, maybe even a slave if you're moderately successful. Privacy is not a concept that exists for most people in Pompeii, but let's say you're doing well. Let's say you're a merchant or a baker, or maybe you own a fullery. one of those laundry businesses that the Romans depended on. Your house is bigger. You might have an atrium, that traditional Roman entrance hall with a rectangular pool in the centre to catch rainwater. The impluvium, they call it. Your walls are painted with frescoes, those vibrant red and yellow and black designs that archaeologists will later call Pompeian red and puzzle over. You might have mosaics on your floor, intricate designs made from thousands of tiny tiles, maybe a cave canem at your entrance. Beware of dog. Some things are universal. The interesting thing about Roman houses in Pompeii is that they're built with the street-facing walls completely windowless. Your house turns inward, away from the chaos of the city, creating its own world around that central courtyard. It's genius for privacy and somewhat genius for temperature control, but it also means your house is darker than you'd expect. Even in midday, the interior rooms rely on oil lamps and whatever sunlight filters in from the atrium and the peristyle garden at the back. Let's talk about what you're going to do about breakfast, because this is where Roman life gets interesting. If you're wealthy, you might have slaves who prepare food for you, but if you're like most people in Pompeii, you don't actually cook much at home. Here's why. Your living space doesn't have a kitchen, or if it does, it's a tiny area with a small brazier, a raised hearth that burns charcoal. Cooking anything substantial means heating up your already sweltering house with an open fire and risking burning the whole building down. Wood and thatch and plaster are not forgiving materials, so what do? You go out. Pompeii is absolutely packed with thermopolia, these street-side food counters where you can buy prepared food and hot drinks. There's about 150 of them in this city, of 15,000 people. Think about that ratio. It's the Roman equivalent of having a fast food restaurant or cafe on every single block. These places have large counters with holes cut into them, dolia they're called, big ceramic jars set into the counter that hold food kept warm over a small fire below. You can get lentil soup, hot wine mixed with honey and spices, chunks of meat in sauce, bread, olives, cheese, fish. It's cheap, it's fast, and it means you're not burning your apartment down trying to make lunch. You walk out onto the Via dell'Abbondanza, and the sensory assault is immediate. The smell hits you first, because let's be honest about this. Pompeii does not smell good. There's no sewer system in the way you'd recognise it. The streets have raised sidewalks and those large stepping stones we mentioned, because the street level itself is essentially an open sewer. Wastewater from houses, shops, and yes, human waste from chamber pots all flows down these stone channels. When it rains, it washes out toward the city gates. When it doesn't rain, which is most of the summer, it just sits there, baking in the sun. Add to this the smell of animals. Pompeii is full of them. Donkeys pulling carts, dogs roaming freely, chickens, pigs, goats. The butcher shops have fresh blood and offal. The fish sellers at the Forum have their catch laid out, and in this heat, fish doesn't stay fresh long. The fulleries, those laundries, they're using urine to clean clothes because the ammonia in aged urine is perfect for removing grease and setting dyes. Yes, really. There are large pots outside these establishments where men urinate, and it's collected for industrial use. The smell is intense, but there are good smells too. Fresh bread from the bakeries, and Pompeii has over 30 of them. The scent of wine from the many bars and taverns. Olive oil, which Romans use for everything from cooking to cleaning their bodies to fueling lamps. Flowers from the gardens that everyone who can afford it tries to maintain. Incense from the temples and shrines scattered throughout the city. The visual chaos matches the olfactory assault. Roman cities are colourful in a way that the white marble ruins don't convey. The buildings are painted, bright reds, deep yellows, rich blacks. The frescoes on public buildings and wealthy homes face the street, showing off the owner's taste and wealth. There's graffiti everywhere, and I mean everywhere. The Romans love writing on walls. Political endorsements for the upcoming elections for city council, advertisements for gladiator games, crude jokes, love declarations, insults, business announcements. Someone has scratched Marcus loves Spendusa on a wall. Someone else has written a crude poem about a rival. There's an advertisement promising 20 pairs of gladiators will fight in the amphitheater next month, sponsored by a local politician trying to win votes. The people themselves are a mix you wouldn't expect if your only reference is Hollywood Romans. Yes, there are people in togas, but togas are actually formal wear, and in this heat most men are wearing tunics, simple knee-length garments belted at the waist. Women wear stolas, long dresses with a belt under the bust. The wealthy distinguish themselves through fabric quality, purple dye which is hideously expensive, jewellery, and the fact that they're not carrying anything because their slaves are doing it for them. And speaking of slaves, we need to talk about this because slavery is so fundamental to Pompeii's economy and daily life that the city wouldn't function without it. Roughly 1 in 3 people in Pompeii is enslaved. They're not marked or branded in most cases. They don't wear special clothing. The only real indicator is often a collar if their owner is worried about them running away, or the fact that they're doing menial labour. Slaves work in houses, in shops, in businesses, in agriculture outside the city walls. Some slaves are better off than free poor people, living in their master's house, eating well, learning trades. Others are worked to death in the fields or the mines. It's a brutal spectrum, and it's everywhere you look. You're walking down the street and you need to decide what you're going to do today. If you're a man with any social standing, you're probably heading to the Forum first. The Forum is the heart of Pompeii, a large rectangular plaza surrounded by temples, government buildings and markets. It's where politics happen, where business deals are made, where you run into people you need to see. The Forum is closed to cart traffic, making it one of the few quiet zones in the city. The ground is paved with travertine, and there's a colonnade running around the edges providing shade. The Forum is dominated by the Temple of Jupiter at the north end, sitting up on a high platform so everyone entering the Forum sees it immediately. Jupiter is the king of the gods, and this temple is impressive, with tall columns and a statue of Jupiter inside that would dwarf you. There's also temples to Apollo and Venus. Venus is particularly important in Pompeii because the city claims her as their patron goddess. After a civil war about 150 years ago, Pompeii became a Roman colony, and it was refounded as Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum. That Venus reference isn't decorative. She's the divine protector of the city. The interesting thing about Roman religion is how practical it is. You're not going to the temple to confess sins or seek spiritual enlightenment in the way later religions will emphasize. You're going to fulfill your obligations to the gods, to make offerings in exchange for their favor, to participate in public festivals, to be seen being pious. Religion and civic duty are completely intertwined. The priests are also politicians. The temples are also treasuries. The festivals are also opportunities for social climbing. Let's say you're at the Forum around mid-morning, which is when the place really comes alive. If there's a legal case being heard, crowds gather to watch because Roman trials are public entertainment. Lawyers give speeches that are performances, trying to sway the judges with rhetoric as much as facts. If you're a citizen with business at the Basilica, the large public building where legal and commercial matters are handled, you're dealing with a building that can hold thousands of people. The acoustics are designed so voices carry, The market is in full swing. The Macellum, the food market, is on the eastern side of the Forum. This is where you buy your fresh meat, fish and produce if you're actually cooking at home, or if you're a slave sent to shop for a household. The fishmongers have stone tables with channels carved in them for blood and water to drain away. The variety of fish available is impressive because Pompeii is only about a mile from the coast. You can get mullet, sea bass, octopus, squid, shellfish. The quality varies wildly depending on when it was caught and how long it's been sitting in the August heat. You notice that Mount Vesuvius is visible from the Forum. It looms over the city to the north, about 5 miles away. It's a beautiful mountain, actually. The slopes are covered in farms and vineyards. The soil there is incredibly fertile because, ironically, volcanic soil is rich in minerals. The wine from Vesuvius slopes is considered quite good. The mountain itself is covered in green. There's no smoke, no steam, no indication that it's anything other than an unusually shaped mountain. The last time it erupted was so long ago that there's no memory of it, no written record, no oral tradition. The Greek geographer Strabo wrote about the mountain earlier in the century and noted that the summit looked like it had been burned, suggesting ancient volcanic activity, but that's academic observation, not lived experience. To the people of Pompeii in 79 AD, Vesuvius is simply part of the landscape. It's the mountain with good wine. It's the reason the soil around Pompeii is so productive. It's a blessing, not a threat. This is crucial to understanding what's coming, because nobody is worried about the mountain. Nobody is prepared. Nobody is watching for warning signs because nobody knows there's anything to watch for. Let's talk about the baths, because if there's one thing Romans are serious about, it's bathing. Pompeii has multiple public bath complexes. The Stabian baths are the oldest and largest. The Forum baths are more centrally located and popular with the business crowd. There's also smaller private baths and baths connected to the gladiatorial barracks. The baths are not just about getting clean. They're social clubs, gyms, business meeting spots and entertainment venues all rolled into one. The bathing process is elaborate. You enter through the amphitheater, the changing room where you strip down and leave your clothes with an attendant or slave. You're then supposed to exercise in the palestra, the courtyard with the colonnade around it. This means wrestling, lifting weights, throwing a ball around, anything to work up a sweat. Romans believe that you need to get dirty before you can get clean, which sounds counterintuitive but makes sense in their system. After exercise, you move through a series of rooms of increasing heat. First the tepidarium, the warm room, then the caldarium, the hot room. The heat comes from a hypocaust system which is genuinely impressive engineering. Under the floor there's an empty space about 2 feet high, supported by stacks of tiles. A furnace heats air that circulates through this space, heating the floor above it. The walls have hollow tiles too, so hot air rises up them. You're essentially in a Roman sauna, and it gets seriously hot. We're talking temperatures well over 100 degrees in the caldarium. You scrape your skin with a strigil, a curved metal tool, because Romans don't really use soap in the way you know it. They oil themselves up, let the oil mix with sweat and dirt, then scrape it all off. It's more effective than it sounds. Then you might take a dip in the hot bath, though honestly the water in these communal baths is not changed frequently. It's heated constantly, which kills some bacteria, but multiple hundreds of people are using the same water. You don't want to think about it too hard. After the heat, you go to the frigidarium, the cold room, and plunge into cold water. This shock to the system is considered healthy. Then you're done. You get dried off, maybe get a massage, definitely get re-oiled because Romans use olive oil like moisturizer, and head back out into the world feeling refreshed. The baths are open to everyone, though there's usually a small fee. Women and men bathe at different times or in different sections. The baths are where you catch up on gossip, make business connections, hear about political news, find out who's sleeping with who. The sound is constant conversation, laughter, the slap of flesh on flesh from people exercising, the splash of water, the echo of voices off the vaulted ceilings. Here's a detail that brings it home. Archaeologists found an inscription in Pompeii, a complaint scratched on a wall near a bath about someone stealing the writer's clothes while he was bathing. Even with attendants, theft at the baths was common enough that people complained about it publicly. Your Pompeii experience includes the very real possibility that while you're enjoying the caldarium, someone is making off with your tunic. Let's shift to food and dining, because Roman food culture is more sophisticated than you might expect. If you're invited to dinner at a wealthy person's house, you're in for an experience that can last hours. Dinner, the cena, is the main meal of the day, and happens in the late afternoon or evening when the heat has broken. You don't sit at a dinner table. You recline on couches arranged in a triclinium, a dining room configured with 3 couches forming a U-shape around a central table. Yes, you eat lying down on your side, propped on your left elbow, reaching for food with your right hand. It's a status thing. Only people of standing get to recline. Women, children, and lower status people might sit. Slaves stand and serve. The food comes in courses. The gustario is the appetizer course. Eggs are popular because Romans believe they aid digestion. You might get olives, raw vegetables with a fish sauce called garum that Romans put on everything. Garum is fermented fish intestines, essentially, and it sounds disgusting, but it's basically the Roman version of umami seasoning. It's everywhere. Every household has it. It's made in industrial quantities along the coast. The main courses, the prima mensa, showcase the host's wealth. If you're at a truly wealthy person's house, you might see multiple types of meat. Romans eat pork, lamb, goat, chicken, duck, wild boar, venison. Peacock if your host is really showing off. Dormice fattened in special jars and cooked in honey. Flamingo tongue was considered a delicacy, though it's more legend than common practice. Fish and shellfish are highly prized. Oysters from Britain are imported at great expense. The preparations are elaborate. Romans like strong flavours. Meat cooked with wine, honey, vinegar, herbs, garum, pepper. Pepper is expensive, imported from India, another status marker. Dishes are often sweet and savoury at the same time, which takes modern palates by surprise but was considered sophisticated. A pork roast might be glazed with honey and garum, stuffed with other meats, served with a fruit sauce. Between courses there's entertainment, musicians playing pipes and lyres, dancers, poetry readings, philosophical discussions if your host is intellectually inclined or wants to seem that way. Drinking is constant throughout. Wine is never drunk straight. It's always mixed with water, sometimes with honey, sometimes with spices. Drinking unmixed wine is considered barbaric and dangerous. The wine is served by slaves who constantly circulate refilling cups. The dessert course, the secunda mensa, brings fruits, nuts, honey cakes. More wine, probably sweeter varieties. If the party's going well, the drinking intensifies. Romans don't have a prohibition against getting drunk, but they do judge you for how you handle it. Vomiting so you can eat more is rumoured but probably exaggerated. Some wealthy houses supposedly had a vomitoria, though the word actually refers to the entrance passages in the amphitheater, not a room for purging. But this is the wealthy experience. Most people in Pompeii are eating much simpler food. Bread is the staple. Pompeii's bakeries produce round loaves marked in wedges so they can be easily broken apart. The ovens are wood-fired. and the smell of fresh bread is everywhere. You eat your bread with whatever you can afford: cheese, olives, garlic, onions, lentils, beans, fish sauce, maybe some cured meat if you're doing well. Grain is so important that the city government subsidizes it, and in Rome itself free grain is distributed to citizens. Running out of grain causes riots. The grain supply is a matter of political survival for those in power. Pompeii gets its grain from Sicily, North Africa, Egypt. The fact that this supply chain works, that grain grown in Egypt ends up as bread in Pompeii, is a testament to Roman logistics and naval power. Let's move to entertainment, because Romans work hard and play hard. The amphitheater in Pompeii is the oldest surviving Roman amphitheater, built around 70 BC. It holds about 20,000 people, which is more than the entire population of Pompeii. On game days, people come from surrounding towns and countryside. The amphitheater is outside the city walls on the eastern edge, a massive oval structure where the seating is built into a natural depression in the ground, reinforced with arches and stonework. Gladiatorial games are the marquee event. These are professional fighters, some slaves, some free men who've chosen this life for the money and fame. They train in a special barracks, the gladiator barracks, which archaeologists found full of weapons, armour, and the remains of men who died when Vesuvius erupted. These men eat well, build muscle, learn specific fighting styles. There's the Murmillo with his large shield and sword, the Retiarius with his net and trident, the Thracian with his curved sword. Each type has different armour, different tactics. The fights are real. Men die in the arena. But it's not the constant bloodbath that movies show. Gladiators are expensive to train and maintain. Killing them every fight would be economically stupid. Most bouts end with one fighter yielding, and the crowd and the sponsor decide if he lives. The thumb gesture, polis verso, though we're not entirely sure if thumbs up meant live or die. The sources are contradictory, but the decision is public, dramatic, and final. The games aren't just gladiators. There's animal hunts, venations, where exotic animals are brought in to fight each other or be hunted by specialists. Bears, lions, leopards, bulls. The logistics of capturing animals in Africa or Asia and transporting them alive to Pompeii is staggering. Some animals don't survive the journey. The ones that do are kept in cages under the amphitheater until their moment in the sun, which usually ends with their death. There's also public executions. Criminals, prisoners of war, sometimes Christians in other parts of the empire, though we don't have specific evidence of that in Pompeii. The executions are elaborate and cruel, designed to deter crime and demonstrate state power. Death by wild animals, crucifixion, burning. Romans don't shy away from making death a spectacle. But here's the thing. Romans don't see this as barbaric. They see it as justice, as entertainment, as a demonstration of Roman virtue like courage and endurance. The gladiator who fights well, even in defeat, is admired. The condemned criminal who dies badly is an example. The exotic animal from the far reaches of the empire proves Rome's reach and power. It's all wrapped up in their worldview. On days without games, there's theatre. Pompeii has two theatres, a large one that holds 5,000 people, and a smaller, covered one for more intimate performances. The plays are comedies, tragedies, pantomimes, musical performances. The actors are professionals, often slaves or freedmen. Acting is not a respectable profession for a citizen, but it's wildly popular entertainment. There's also the simple entertainment of the streets. Street performers, musicians, con artists, fortune tellers. The forum is where you go to see and be seen, to argue about politics, to meet friends. The taverns and bars, the Koppenai and Poppenai, are where you drink, gamble, sometimes hire prostitutes. Gambling with dice is technically illegal, but absolutely everywhere. Board games are popular. The game of 12 lines, kind of like backgammon, is found scratched into surfaces all over the city. Let's talk about the reality of medical care, because this is where the ancient world becomes truly alien. There are doctors in Pompeii. Some are skilled, trained in the Greek medical tradition, understanding of anatomy from battlefields and gladiatorial injuries. They can set bones, stitch wounds, perform some surgeries, mix herbal remedies that actually work. But they're working with a fundamentally flawed understanding of how the body works. The theory of the four humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, dominates medical thinking. Disease is seen as an imbalance of these humours. Treatment involves trying to restore balance through bleeding, purging, inducing vomiting, adjusting diet. Some of this helps, often by accident. Much of it doesn't or actively makes things worse. There's no germ theory, no understanding of infection, no antibiotics. A simple cut can become infected and kill you. Childbirth is incredibly dangerous. Many women die delivering babies. Many babies die in infancy. If you make it past age 5, your chances improve significantly, but life expectancy is still only mid-20s on average. The wealthy live longer because they eat better, live in cleaner conditions, and can afford doctors. The poor die young from disease, malnutrition, accidents, violence. Pain management is limited. Opium exists and is used, but it's not widely available. Alcohol is the most common painkiller. Dental care is primitive. Toothaches are just something you endure. If a tooth is truly unbearable, it can be pulled, but there's no Novocaine, no sterilization. You just have to bear it. Surgery without anesthesia is a horror. Fast surgeons are valued because the faster they work, the less the patient suffers. Amputation of a limb can be done, but the survival rate is not great. Infection kills many who survive the initial procedure. Battlefield medicine is more advanced than civilian because there's more practice, more urgency, more innovation born from necessity. Here's a detail that makes it real. Archaeologists found a medical kit in Pompeii with the instruments still inside. Scalpels, probes, hooks, forceps. They're recognizable. A modern surgeon would understand what most of them are for. But they were used without any of the safeguards modern medicine takes for granted. Every surgery was a roll of the dice. Mental illness is poorly understood. The Romans have some concept of melancholy, what we might call depression, and they recognize madness. Treatment ranges from diet changes to drugs to, in extreme cases, physical restraint. There's stigma attached. A person known to be mad loses social standing, can lose property rights. The causes are attributed to imbalances of humours, possession by spirits, or simply character weakness. The social structure of Pompeii is rigid and complex. At the top you have the Ordo Decurionum, the city council, made up of wealthy men who've held various magistracies. These are your local elite, the ones with the fancy houses, the ones who sponsor gladiator games and build public buildings with their names on them. Social climbing is possible, but requires either massive wealth or extraordinary military service. Below them, there's a whole middle tier of successful merchants, shop owners, skilled artisans. These people are comfortable. They own their businesses, their homes. They have slaves. They're respected in their neighborhoods. They're invited to some social functions. They're not elite, but they're doing well. Then you have the working poor, day laborers, small shop assistants, farmers who own small plots barely enough to feed their families, they rent their housing, often just a single room, their one bad harvest, one illness, one accident away from disaster. They depend on patron-client relationships, working for wealthier men in exchange for protection and occasional handouts, and at the bottom, the enslaved. Some slaves are relatively well off, trusted household managers or skilled artisans whose owners allow them to keep a portion of their earnings, potentially buying their freedom eventually. Others are property worked as hard as their masters can drive them. Escaped slaves face brutal punishment if caught, branding, crucifixion in extreme cases, a metal collar inscribed with, "I have run away, catch me and return me to my master." Women's status depends entirely on their family status. A wealthy woman has influence within her household, can own property in certain situations, can be educated, can host salons, but she can't vote, can't hold office, needs a male guardian for legal matters. A poor woman works, often in jobs like spinning, weaving, selling goods in the market. A slave woman has no status at all and is vulnerable to sexual exploitation. Children are valued, but not in the way modern Western culture values them. Infant mortality is so high that emotional attachment might be held back until a child survives the dangerous first years. Education is for those who can afford it. Wealthy boys are tutored in reading, writing, arithmetic, rhetoric, Greek language and literature. Some girls get education too, though less commonly. Poor children work as soon as they're able. The city infrastructure is more sophisticated than you might expect. The aqueduct brings fresh water from the mountains. Public fountains are placed throughout the city, never more than a block or two from anyone's home. The water flows constantly, and people come with jugs to fill them. Some wealthy houses have private water connections, pipes bringing water directly into their homes for their fountains and gardens. This is a status symbol and costs a significant fee to the city. The roads themselves tell a story about Roman engineering and daily life. The large stepping stones that cross the street serve multiple purposes. They let pedestrians cross without stepping in the filth that flows through the street channels. They're spaced precisely to let cartwheels pass through on either side, and during the frequent rains, they act as speed bumps, forcing carts to slow down in crowded areas. It's practical design born from trial and error over centuries. The wear patterns on these stones are visible even today. The cartwheels, rolling over the same route day after day, year after year, have worn grooves into solid rock. You can see exactly where the traffic flows, which streets are busiest, which routes the heavy commercial carts take. It's ancient traffic data preserved in stone. But here's what the smooth stones and impressive aqueducts don't show you: the smell. We touched on this before, but it bears repeating because the smell of Pompeii is something no amount of beautiful frescoes can overcome. In August, when temperatures are in the 90s and humidity is high, the city reeks. Human waste, animal waste, garbage, industrial processes, all of it mixing in the heat. The wealthy burn incense constantly. Perfumes are not a luxury, they're a necessity. You wear them, or you spend your day breathing air that makes you gag. The industries that smell worst are tucked into specific areas when possible, but this is a dense city. Someone's always living near something awful. The fish sauce factories, the garum production facilities, they're located mostly outside the city walls or at the edges, but the wind carries that fermented fish smell for miles. Tanneries, where leather is cured using urine and animal brains and lime, are notorious. The fullers who clean clothes by stomping them in vats of aged urine, we mentioned them. but living next to one means your house always smells like ammonia. Let's talk about family life in more detail, because the Roman family structure is both familiar and alien. The paterfamilias, the male head of household, has absolute legal authority over everyone in his family, and I mean absolute. His wife, his children, even his adult sons if he's still alive, they're all under his legal power, his patria potestas. In theory, the paterfamilias can sell his children into slavery. He can order them to divorce their spouses. He can refuse to recognize a newborn, which means the infant is exposed, left outside to die or be picked up by slavers. He can execute his own children for serious offences, though by the 1st century AD this is rare and would cause massive social scandal. But the legal power exists. In practice, most fathers are not tyrants. They're just people trying to run a household, make a living, raise children who'll take care of them in old age. But the power imbalance is total and legal. A Roman woman never fully comes of age legally. She goes from her father's authority to her husband's authority. If both are dead, she might have a degree of independence, especially if she's wealthy, but there's always supposed to be a male guardian. Children in Pompeii have a childhood, but it's shorter than modern childhoods. By age 7 or 8, children of working families are helping with the family business. The baker's son is learning to work the ovens. The merchant's daughter is learning to keep accounts. Wealthy children have more leisure, more education, but even they have responsibilities and expectations. Toys exist. Archaeologists have found them. Dolls, wooden swords, knuckle bones for playing games, small figures of animals and people. Children play in the streets, in the courtyards, in the gardens if they have them. They race, wrestle, play ball games. They're children. They find ways to have fun. But child mortality is so high that parents can't afford to get too attached too soon. Some historians debate this, arguing that parents loved their children as much as modern parents do, and the evidence supports this in terms of grief expressions when children died. But there's also a practical numbness that has to develop when 1 in 3 or more of your children won't survive to adulthood. Infant mortality is worst. If a baby makes it past the first year, the odds improve significantly. If they make it past age 5, they've got a reasonable chance. But those first years are brutal. Diarrheal diseases from contaminated water, respiratory infections, malnutrition even in families that aren't desperately poor, because understanding infant nutrition is not what it needs to be. Accidents, infections from minor cuts, and then there's deliberate infant mortality. Exposure of unwanted babies is legal and practiced. Deformed infants are almost always exposed because there's no way to care for a child with serious disabilities. Female infants are more likely to be exposed than male infants because daughters require dowries and are seen as less economically valuable. Infants born to slaves or from extramarital affairs might be exposed. It's brutal, and it's common enough that it's not even particularly remarked upon. The exposed infants who don't die from exposure are picked up by people who raise them as slaves or, in some cases, prostitutes. There's a whole economy around it. It's one of the darker aspects of Roman life that doesn't get talked about much because it's uncomfortable. But it's there. Education in Pompeii is for those who can afford it. There's no public school system. If you want your child educated, you hire a tutor or send them to a private school. The Grammaticus teaches reading, writing, arithmetic, Greek literature, Roman literature, some history. The Rhetor teaches public speaking, logic, philosophy, the skills needed for law and politics. The teaching methods are what you'd expect from a society without child psychology or modern pedagogy. Memorization and recitation are key. Students learn by copying texts, by reciting passages, by drilling. Corporal punishment is absolutely standard. The teacher has a stick and uses it freely. Making a mistake means getting hit. It's just how it's done. Girls rarely get education beyond basic literacy, if they get that much. A wealthy family might educate a daughter in literature, music, dance, the accomplishments expected of a refined woman. But serious academic education is for boys because boys will need it for public life. Literacy rates are debated by scholars. Maybe 10 to 20% of the population can read and write with any proficiency. Maybe higher in cities like Pompeii, but it's not universal. Most people get through life without reading much beyond shop signs and public notices. They have other skills. They can calculate in their heads. They can judge the quality of goods. They can negotiate. They're not stupid. They just don't need written literacy for most of what they do. Let's talk about religion in more practical terms. We covered the basics, but the day-to-day religious experience in Pompeii is constant and varied. You wake up and make an offering at the household lararium. Before you eat breakfast, you make a small offering, maybe throwing a bit of bread into a flame. When you leave the house, you might stop at a street shrine and make a quick prayer or offering. These street shrines are everywhere. Small niches in walls, painted altars at crossroads, little temples at intersections. The lares compitales, the guardian spirits of the crossroads, have shrines that the neighbourhood maintains collectively. You pass by. You make a nod or a gesture. You keep moving. Religion is woven into the urban landscape. The major temples are for major occasions, state festivals, personal crises, fulfilling vows. If you need something important, you go to the appropriate god's temple. You make an offering. You make a vow. If the god delivers, you fulfill the vow, usually with a bigger offering or a dedication. If the god doesn't deliver, well, maybe you offended them somehow, or maybe another god interfered, or maybe the timing wasn't right. There's always an explanation that preserves belief. Priests in Pompeii are not separate from civic life. The same men who serve as magistrates serve as priests. It's another public duty, another way to serve the community and enhance your family's status. The priests conduct the public rituals, maintain the temples, interpret omens, but they're not spiritual leaders in the modern sense. They're ritualists and administrators. Mystery cults are also present in Pompeii. The cult of Isis has a temple, offering a more personal religious experience with initiation rites and secret ceremonies. Dionysian mysteries are practiced, though more discreetly because they've been viewed with suspicion since a scandal in Rome over a century earlier. These cults offer something traditional. Roman religion doesn't. A sense of personal connection with the divine, promises of better afterlife, emotional and ecstatic experiences. Magic and curse tablets are taken completely seriously. If you want to curse an enemy, you go to someone who knows how, you pay them, and they write a curse on a thin sheet of lead. The curse is specific. You name the person, you specify what you want to happen to them, you invoke spirits or gods to carry it out. Then the tablet is folded or rolled up and deposited somewhere significant. A temple, a tomb, a well, a crossroad. The curses found at Pompeii and elsewhere in the Roman world range from petty to horrifying. Someone cursing a business rival so they'll fail. Someone cursing a romantic rival so they'll lose their looks. Someone cursing a thief, hoping they'll die painfully. Athletes cursing other athletes before competitions. It's considered perfectly normal to do this if someone has wronged you. Protective amulets counter curses and the evil eye. The phallus we mentioned before is common. The tintinnabulum, A wind chime with phalluses and bells hangs in doorways to ward off evil. Manis ficus, a hand gesture with the thumb between the first two fingers, is protective. Little figures, fastenus charms, are worn around the neck. If you're wealthy, these might be gold or silver. If you're poor, they're bronze or even lead. The evil eye, the belief that someone can curse you just by looking at you with envy or malice, is taken completely seriously. If someone admires your child too enthusiastically, you worry they've cursed the child with the evil eye. You need to perform a protective ritual or make sure the child is wearing an amulet. If your business suddenly goes wrong after someone visited, maybe they gave you the evil eye. It's a constant low-level anxiety. Prophecy and fortune-telling are big business. There's people who claim to interpret dreams, read omens from bird flights, see the future in reflections or patterns. Some are probably sincere believers in their own abilities. Others are con artists who figured out how to read people and tell them what they want to hear. But people pay for these services constantly because the future is terrifying and uncertain, and any information, even dubious information, is better than none. The average person's relationship with the divine is transactional, anxious, and constant. You're always trying to stay on the God's good side, always worried about offending them accidentally, always looking for signs about whether your plans will succeed. It's exhausting in its own way. Let's shift to entertainment beyond the amphitheater. Music is everywhere in Pompeii. Street musicians play for coins. Wealthy dinners feature professional musicians. Religious festivals have musical processions. The instruments are pipes, like the aulos and the panpipes. String instruments like the lyre and the cithara. Percussion, cymbals, tambourines. Brass instruments like the cornu, a large curved horn. The music itself is lost. We don't know what Roman music sounded like. We have some fragments of notation, but not enough to reconstruct performances. We know it was important, woven into daily life, but the actual sound is gone forever. That's haunting in its own way, an entire artistic tradition that's simply silent now. Dancing is part of festivals and entertainment. Professional dancers perform at wealthy dinners and public festivals. The dancing is probably more sensual and athletic than restrained. Respectable people don't dance, publicly themselves, generally. It's something you watch, not participate in, if you're concerned about your dignity. Theatre is more respectable, though actors themselves are low status. The plays performed in Pompeii's theatres are mostly comedies. Roman audiences love bawdy humour, clever wordplay, physical comedy, mistaken identity plots. The actors wear masks that exaggerate expressions so people in the back rows can see. The performances are loud, energetic and interactive. Audiences cheer, boo, throw things if they don't like it. Tragedies are performed too, but they're less popular. Romans prefer entertainment that makes them laugh rather than contemplate mortality and fate, which makes sense given how much death they live with anyway. Why pay to be sad when life already provides plenty of sadness? Board games are popular. The game of 12 lines, similar to backgammon, is played in taverns and homes. Dice games are everywhere despite being technically illegal. People bet on everything. Fights, races, dice throws, even how many beans are in a jar. Gambling is deeply embedded in the culture. They're street performers, acrobats, jugglers, storytellers. The forum and other public spaces become stages for anyone with an act and the confidence to perform. Some are skilled, others are desperate people trying to earn a few coins any way they can. Conversation is entertainment. Romans value wit and rhetoric. Being able to argue cleverly, tell a good story, make people laugh, these are valued skills. Dinner parties among the educated can go on for hours with philosophical debates, literary discussions, political arguments. It's intellectual sport. For women, entertainment options are more limited. They can attend the theatre, the games, public festivals, but they're more restricted in where they can go alone, especially women of respectable families. Much of their social life happens in homes, in the baths during women's hours, at religious festivals. It's a narrower world. Let's talk about the military presence in Pompeii, or rather the lack of it. Pompeii is not a military base, it's a civilian city. But military service is part of Roman life, especially for men of the lower classes. The legions offer pay, food, a career path for men without better options. Military veterans live in Pompeii. You can spot them sometimes, men with military bearing, possibly missing fingers or scarred from old wounds. They've served there 25 years or whatever time they signed up for, and they've been granted land or money, and they've settled in places like Pompeii to live out their remaining years. These veterans have seen things most Pompeians haven't. They've been to the edges of the empire. They've fought barbarians, defended borders, built roads and forts. They've killed people and watched friends die. And now they're here, running a shop or farming a plot, trying to be civilians again. The empire feels distant from Pompeii most of the time. The emperor is far away in Rome. Imperial policy matters when it affects taxes or trade or the grain supply, but daily life is local. You care more about who's winning the election for Edel than who the emperor is appointing to govern Syria. But the empire is also the reason Pompeii exists as it does. The Roman peace, the Pax Romana, means trade routes are safe enough to travel. Goods come from Egypt, Greece, Spain, Gaul, North Africa. The wealth flows because the empire protects commerce. Pirates are suppressed, bandits are hunted, roads are maintained. If you're wealthy in Pompeii, you might have garum from Spain, olive oil from Greece, wine from Crete, exotic spices from India, silk from China via the trade routes. Your wealth can buy you products from literally thousands of miles away. That's the empire working. If you're poor in Pompeii, the empire means taxes that hit you hard, military service that might kill you, and grain that keeps you from starving but comes with strings attached. The empire is more complicated for you. Slavery deserves another look because it's so fundamental and so awful. The enslaved people in Pompeii are not a monolithic group. Some are well-treated, skilled workers who have reasonable lives and hope of eventual freedom. Others are brutalized, property worked until they break. A skilled Greek slave who serves as a tutor or accountant might live comfortably, eat well, even have some savings. His owner might promise manumission, freedom, after a certain number of years of service. This isn't kindness necessarily, it's investment. A slave who hopes for freedom works harder. A slave working in the fields or the mines has a life that's short and brutal. No hope of freedom, minimal food, constant physical labour, beatings for any infraction or just for the master's bad mood. These slaves don't live in the city mostly. They're outside the walls on the farms and in the rural industries. Household slaves in the city are somewhere in between. Their conditions depend entirely on their owner's character and their own position in the household hierarchy. The head housekeeper or the master's personal attendant has better conditions than the lowest cleaning slave. Female slaves are especially vulnerable to sexual exploitation. There's no recourse. If the master wants to use a slave sexually, he can. If a male slave is attractive, the same applies. Roman law doesn't recognize slave marriage as legal marriage. Families can be sold apart. Children born to slave women belong to the mother's owner. But here's the complicated part. Slaves are also people who form relationships, have hopes, find joy where they can. They're not perpetual victims in their own minds. They're humans dealing with terrible circumstances. They gossip with each other. They fall in love. They're proud of their skills. They resist in small ways when they can. They're alive and human in a system designed to reduce them to property. Manumission, the freeing of slaves, happens regularly. Sometimes it's a reward for loyal service. Sometimes the slave has saved enough money, which owners sometimes allow, to buy their freedom. Sometimes it's in the owner's will, freeing slaves upon the owner's death. Freed slaves, liberti, are still tied to their former owners socially and economically, but they're free. The children of freed slaves born after manumission are full citizens legally. That's how Roman society replenishes itself. Constant injection of former slaves and their descendants into the citizen body. It's a pressure release valve that keeps the system stable. The contradiction at the heart of Roman society is that they value liberty, dignitas, freedom from domination, and they build their entire economy on slavery, the ultimate domination. They don't see this as contradictory, because slaves aren't fully human in the legal and social framework. They're property that happens to talk and think. Time in Pompeii is measured differently than modern time. There's no clocks in the modern sense. The sundial exists and there's a few in Pompeii's public spaces, but they're not precise and they don't work at night or when it's cloudy. Water clocks, clepsydrae, are more accurate but rare and expensive. Most people judge time by the sun's position, by shadow length, by when the rooster crows, by when the baths open, by hunger and tiredness. Time is flexible. "I'll meet you mid-morning" means something like between the 3rd and 5th hour after sunrise, which changes with the seasons because Roman hours are calculated as 12 hours of daylight, regardless of whether daylight is 8 hours or 16 hours long. This means the length of an hour changes with the season. A summer hour is longer than a winter hour. It's confusing and imprecise by modern standards. But it works because everyone understands it and nobody needs precision to the minute. The calendar is complex. Months are named, but dates within months are calculated relative to 3 fixed points. The calends, first of the month, the nons, 5th or 7th depending on the month, and the ides, 13th or 15th. You don't say August 24th, you say 9 days before the calends of September, and you count inclusively, meaning both endpoints are counted, which makes the math even more confusing. People simplify in practice. A few days after the ides, or just before the calends, or mid-month. Precision isn't usually necessary. You show up when you show up. Deals are sealed with witnesses, not timestamps. The year is 79 AD by our reckoning, but Romans don't use that dating system. They date by consulship. In the consulship of Vespasian for the 8th time and Titus for the 6th time is what they'd say for 79 AD. Or they count years from the founding of Rome, ab urbe condita, which would make 79 AD the year 832. It's cumbersome, but that's how official documents work. Ordinary people probably don't track years precisely unless they need to for legal reasons. You know roughly how old you are. You know what season it is. You know when the festivals happen. That's enough. The festivals, speaking of which, structure the year more than anything. Religious festivals with required observances, public spectacles, days off from work. Some festivals are solemn, others are raucous, celebrations. The Saturnalia in December is when social norms invert. Masters serve slaves. Gambling is allowed. Everyone drinks too much. It's the Roman version of carnival. The calendar is dotted with festivals. There's well over 100 official religious festivals in the Roman calendar, though not all are celebrated equally everywhere. Local festivals honour local gods or commemorate local events. Your neighbourhood has its own celebrations. Your trade guild has its own observances. This means there's always something happening, always a reason to gather, to feast, to perform rituals, to watch spectacles. It breaks up the monotony of work and provides social cohesion. Everyone celebrates together. Social divisions are acknowledged but sometimes temporarily suspended. It's pressure release and social control all at once. As evening comes in Pompeii, the city's character changes. The respectable close their shops and retreat to their homes. The temperature drops mercifully. The streets are less crowded but more dangerous. Lamps are lit in windows and doorways, casting pools of flickering light. This is when the taverns and bars come alive. The Coppanae and Popinae fill with working men drinking cheap wine, eating hot food from the counter, gambling, arguing, laughing too loud. Prostitutes solicit customers. The air is thick with wine fumes, sweat, the smell of oil lamps burning. Fights break out with regularity. Tempers flare, knives come out, blood is spilled. Most fights are broken up before anyone dies, but not always. The morning sometimes reveals a body in an alley, robbed and stabbed. The city wakes around it and moves on. For the wealthy, evening means dinner parties that can last hours. For the working poor, it means collapsing into bed exhausted. For slaves, it means finally finishing the day's endless tasks and grabbing what sleep they can. Night in Pompeii is darker than you can imagine if you've only known modern cities. No street lights, no electric glow, just stars if the sky is clear, and whatever moonlight filters through, if there's a moon. The darkness is profound and absolute. People don't travel at night if they can avoid it. It's not safe, not just from human threats, but from the basic danger of moving through a city where you can't see the ground, where you might step wrong and twist an ankle or fall into a drainage channel or trip over something in the street. The night sounds are different. Dogs barking in the distance, cats yowling, someone singing drunkenly, the watch calling out that all's well or not calling if something's wrong, the creak of buildings settling, the rustle of wind through gardens, and always, always, in the background, so constant that people stop noticing, the mountain, Vesuvius, looming to the north, invisible in the darkness, silent, sleeping, waiting. August 24th, 79. AD begins like any other summer day in Pompeii. The sun rises over the Bay of Naples around 6 in the morning. The heat builds quickly. People wake, make their morning offerings to the household gods, head out into the streets. The bakers have been up since before dawn, firing their ovens. The smell of fresh bread competes with all the other smells of the city waking up. It's hot. It's going to be another scorcher. The kind of day where you move slowly, where you seek shade, where the heat sits on you like a physical weight. The kind of day where by afternoon, if you can, you retreat indoors and wait for evening to cool things down. Around midday, maybe 1 in the afternoon, everything changes. Mount Vesuvius explodes. The initial explosion is beyond anything in living memory. The sound is not just loud. It's a physical force that you feel in your chest, in your bones. It's the sound of the earth cracking open. People throughout the region hear it. In Misenum, 20 miles away across the bay, Pliny the Younger and his uncle Pliny the Elder hear it clearly. From Pompeii, 5 miles from the mountain, what you see is impossible to process. A column of material shoots straight up from the summit. It rises at incredible speed, hundreds of miles per hour, punching up through the atmosphere. It's dark grey, almost black, and it keeps rising. 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet. It doesn't stop. The column is massive, miles wide at its base, billowing and churning as it rises. Material within it is glowing red from the heat. Lightning flashes inside the cloud, thousands of strikes, because all that ash and rock grinding together generates static electricity. The lightning illuminates the dark cloud from within, making it pulse with red and orange light. Everyone in Pompeii stops and stares. You're in the forum conducting business, or you're at the baths, or you're in your shop, and suddenly there's this sound and you run outside and the mountain has exploded. The mountain that's been there your entire life, that's been there for centuries, has suddenly become something else entirely. The initial reaction is confusion. Some people think it's a massive thunderstorm forming, though the sky was clear moments ago. Others recognize that this is something to do with the mountain itself, but don't have a framework for understanding what. A few educated people might remember Greek accounts of volcanic activity in other parts of the Mediterranean, but even they can't comprehend the scale of what they're seeing. For the first hour or so, Pompeii itself is not directly affected. The column is rising straight up, carried by its own tremendous energy and heat. The wind at high altitude is blowing southeast. People watch in fear and fascination. Some start to panic. Others stand frozen, unable to look away from the spectacle. Then the column reaches a height where the physics change. It's risen 20, maybe 25 miles into the atmosphere. It can't sustain itself anymore. The ash and pumice, billions of tons of material, are too heavy. The column begins to spread outward at the top, forming a shape that looks like an umbrella pine tree, which is exactly how Pliny the Younger will describe it in his letters. This is when it becomes clear that Pompeii is in trouble, because the prevailing wind is blowing that spreading cloud southeast, directly toward the city. The first pumice stones start falling on Pompeii in the early afternoon, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock. They're small at first, the size of gravel, white or pale grey. They patter down like strange hail. People look up, confused, as rocks fall from the sky. Within minutes, the pumice gets bigger, stones the size of walnuts, then fist-sized chunks, and they don't stop falling. It's a continuous rain of volcanic rock, and it's accumulating fast. Within an hour, there's several inches on the ground. Within 2 hours, it's a foot deep in the streets. Pumice is volcanic rock full of gas bubbles, so it's lighter than solid rock, but it's still rock. A piece the size of your fist weighs maybe half a pound, and millions of them are falling. Getting hit by one hurts. Getting hit in the head by a large piece can kill you. The sky has gone dark. The ash in the air is blocking the sun. Pompeii goes from bright summer afternoon to twilight, then to a darkness broken only by the glow from the mountain and whatever lamps people manage to light. The air becomes hard to breathe. The ash is fine and gritty. It gets in your nose, your throat, your eyes. Everyone is coughing. Now people start making decisions. Do you stay or do you flee? It's an impossible choice with no good answer. If you stay, you're trapped in your house, hoping the roof doesn't collapse under the weight of accumulating pumice. If you flee, you're running through a rain of stones through darkness, with no idea where to go that will be safer. Many people decide to run. They grab what they can carry. Money, jewellery, a few precious items, maybe some food and water if they think of it. They head for the city gates. The streets quickly become clogged with people, carts, animals, everyone trying to leave at once. But the pumice is already knee-deep in places. Walking through it is like trying to run through deep snow, except the snow is made of sharp rocks that shift under your feet. You're being pelted from above constantly. You're in total darkness except for whatever torch or lamp you're carrying, and the smoke and ash make those nearly useless. You're terrified. Your children are crying. Your elderly parents can't move fast enough. It's chaos. Some people make it out the city. We know this because the population of Pompeii was about 15,000 people, and archaeologists have found remains of about 1,100 bodies. That means thousands escaped. But escaping Pompeii doesn't mean escaping the eruption. The pumice is falling over a huge area. The neighbouring towns are being buried. The countryside is affected. The roads are becoming impassable. Other people decide to stay. Maybe they don't believe it will get worse. Maybe they're too old or sick to flee. Maybe they're trying to protect their property. Maybe they're just paralysed by fear and indecision. They retreat into their homes, usually into interior rooms with the strongest roofs, away from windows and outside walls. They wait for it to stop. The pumice fall continues for 18 hours, all afternoon, all evening, all night. The layer keeps building, 3 feet deep, 5 feet, 8 feet. The ground level of Pompeii is rising as the city is buried from the bottom up. Buildings start collapsing. Roofs are not designed to hold this kind of weight. The Roman practice of using tile roofs means that when they collapse catastrophically. Wooden beams snap. Tiles crash down. The pumice that's been accumulating on the roof pours into the building through the collapsed ceiling. The sound of collapses echoes through the city constantly. A crash, a rumble, sometimes a scream, then silence. You hear a building go down nearby and wonder if your building is next. You're in the dark, listening to the continuous patter of pumice falling on your roof, listening to the structure creak and groan under the weight, and you have no idea if the roof will hold or if it will collapse and bury you. Some people are buried alive when roofs cave in. The pumice fills the room, covering them where they crouch. It's not a quick death. You're conscious as the room fills, as the weight presses down on you, as you can't breathe anymore. Your last moments are in total darkness, suffocating under volcanic stone. Others die when structural elements collapse on them. A beam falls and crushes your skull. A wall tips over and pins you. These deaths are quicker, at least. Archaeologists have found skeletons with fractured skulls, with broken bones, clear evidence of violent trauma from collapsing buildings. The people who stayed indoors are trapped now. The pumice has piled up against doors and windows, sealing them in. Even if you wanted to leave, you can't without digging through 10 feet of pumice from inside, which is nearly impossible. The air in the sealed rooms is getting stale. The ash that's filtered in makes every breath difficult. You're with your family in the darkness, waiting, hoping this will end. Around midnight, about 11 or 12 hours into the eruption, something changes. The pumice fall begins to ease slightly. For people still alive in Pompeii, this might seem like hope. Maybe it's ending. Maybe we can escape now. Some people do try to leave at this point. They dig through the pumice, blocking their doors, emerge into a city that's buried under 10 to 15 feet of volcanic material, and try to find their way out. The city is unrecognizable. The streets are buried. The stepping stones are covered. Buildings are collapsed or buried to their second stories. Orienting yourself is nearly impossible, but the eruption isn't ending. It's entering its deadliest phase. What happens next is the result of the eruption column becoming unstable. For 18 hours the column has been sustained by the force of the eruption pushing it up, but now parts of it are collapsing. And when a column of superheated gas and ash collapses, it doesn't just settle gently, it avalanches. This creates what volcanologists call a pyroclastic surge. It's a ground-hugging cloud of superheated gas, ash and rock that races down the side of the volcano at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The temperature inside can exceed 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing survives direct contact with it. The first major surge hits Herculaneum, which is closer to Vesuvius than Pompeii, around midnight or 1 in the morning. Herculaneum is instantly obliterated. The hundreds of people who fled to the boathouses on the beach, thinking they would escape by sea, die instantly. The heat kills them before they can even inhale the toxic gas. The surge buries the entire city under 60 feet of material that will harden into rock. Pompeii is farther away, so the surges that hit it are less intense but still lethal. Multiple surges sweep through the city in the early morning hours of August 25th. The first one probably arrives around 3 or 4 in the morning. You cannot run from a pyroclastic surge. It moves too fast. It's like trying to outrun an avalanche or a tidal wave. If you're outside when it hits, you die. If you're inside and the surge penetrates the building, you die. The surge is not visible in the darkness. You might hear it coming, a rushing, roaring sound. You might feel the temperature spike suddenly. Then it hits. The heat kills you in seconds. Your body's automatic response is to take a deep breath, maybe to scream, and you inhale superheated gas that sears your lungs instantly. Your brain shuts down from the heat before you can fully process what's happening. The bodies found from the pyroclastic surges show characteristic positions. They're curled up, arms and legs drawn in, a phenomenon called pugilistic posture. It's not a defensive reaction. It's what happens when extreme heat causes muscles to contract involuntarily. The body draws inward as the muscle tissue tightens from heat exposure. People are frozen in their last actions. A family huddled together in a room, a man trying to shield his face, a woman clutching her jewellery, a dog on a chain, pulling desperately to escape, unable to break free. These aren't preserved as bodies initially. The soft tissue decomposes over time, leaving cavities in the hardened ash. When archaeologists pour plaster into these cavities centuries later, they get exact casts of people in their final moments. The casts are unbearable to look at because they're so detailed and so human. You can see clothing folds, facial features, hair, teeth, the expressions of terror or pain or resignation. One famous cast shows a man lying on his side, head pillowed on his arm, looking almost peaceful. But he's not peaceful. He's dead, killed by heat and toxic gas. Another cast shows a pregnant woman, her swollen belly visible, who died trying to protect herself. There's a cast of a family, adults and children together, their bodies intertwined in death. They died in the darkness, in terror, probably, calling out to each other, not knowing if anyone else in the city had survived. The cast of the dog is particularly affecting. The dog was chained, probably left when its owner fled or died. It couldn't escape. The cast shows the collar, the chain, the dog's body twisted and contorted, pulling against the chain in its final moments. Someone's pet, unable to save itself, dying alone in the darkness. By dawn, on August 25th, about 19 hours after the eruption began, the main phase is over. Vesuvius continues to erupt for days afterward, but less violently. The catastrophic destruction is complete. Pompeii is buried under about 13 to 20 feet of pumice and ash, depending on location. Herculaneum is under 60 feet of material that's already hardening into rock. The cities are gone. simply erased. From the perspective of survivors and people in the region, Pompeii and the neighbouring towns have vanished. The landscape is transformed. Where there were thriving cities, there are now grey expanses of ash and pumice. The coastline has shifted because of all the material that flowed into the sea. River valleys are filled in. It's apocalyptic. The survivors, the thousands who managed to escape before the worst hit, are scattered throughout the region. They've lost everything. Their homes, their businesses, their possessions, often their family members. Some have burns. Many have respiratory problems from breathing ash. They're refugees with nowhere to go. The Roman government responds quickly. Emperor Titus, who's only been emperor for about 2 months when this happens, sends aid. Money for relief. Officials to coordinate recovery efforts. But there's not much to recover. The cities are too deeply buried. Digging out Pompeii would require moving millions of tons of volcanic material with hand tools and human labour. It's not practical. Some survivors come back to where Pompeii used to be and try to dig down to their homes to retrieve valuables. Archaeologists have found evidence of these early tunnels, people desperately trying to find their houses, their money, their precious objects buried under the pumice. Some succeeded in recovering a few things, most didn't. Over time, Pompeii fades from common knowledge. The survivors die. Their children remember the stories but didn't experience it themselves. Their grandchildren know it only as family history. The exact location is eventually lost. People know that cities were buried by Vesuvius in 79 AD because Pliny the Younger's letters preserve the account. But where exactly those cities were becomes unclear. Centuries pass, the Roman Empire falls, the Middle Ages come and go, the Renaissance happens, the landscape changes through earthquakes, erosion, construction, agriculture. People live in the region, farm the land that sits above the buried city, and have no idea what's underneath them. It's not until the 16th century that people start suspecting something is buried there. Construction workers digging a channel accidentally break into ancient buildings, but nothing systematic happens. It's not until 1748 that serious excavation begins, and even then it's treasure hunting more than archaeology. The King of Naples wants ancient art and artifacts for his collection. Workers dig into what turns out to be Pompeii and start pulling out statues, frescoes, mosaics, anything valuable or beautiful. The context is destroyed. The scientific value is lost. It's looting with official sanction. But as they dig more, as more of the city is uncovered, people start to realize what they've found. This isn't just a ruin. It's an entire Roman city, preserved almost exactly as it was the day it was buried. The buildings are still standing, the streets are intact, the paintings on the walls are still bright, the graffiti is still legible, and then they find the bodies. The excavation becomes more scientific over time, especially in the mid-19th century when archaeology develops as a real discipline. Giuseppe Fiorelli, who directs excavations in the 1860s, develops the plaster cast technique. He realizes that when bodies decomposed in the hardened ash, they left cavities. Pour plaster into the cavities, and you get exact casts of the bodies in their final positions. Suddenly, the people of Pompeii are visible again, not as skeletons or abstract remains, but as they were in their last moments. The impact is profound. These aren't ancient Romans from a history book. These are people. You can see their faces, their clothes, their humanity. What we've learned from Pompeii is incalculable. It's the most complete picture of daily Roman life we have from anywhere. Every aspect of the city teaches us something. The houses show how Romans lived, how they decorated, what they valued aesthetically. The workshops show how they worked. The bars and restaurants show what they ate and drank. The graffiti shows how ordinary people wrote, what they thought about, what they found funny or important or worthy of comment. The bodies and skeletons tell us about health, diet, age at death, diseases, injuries. Modern analysis can determine nutritional deficiencies, occupational markers like enlarged muscles in specific patterns, even DNA and ancestry. One recent study analysed bones and found that diets were surprisingly good, even among the poor, because of the proximity to the sea and the fertility of the volcanic soil. The layers of ash preserve organic materials that usually decay: wood, fabric, food, even papyrus scrolls. At a villa near Pompeii, there was a library that was carbonized by the heat. The scrolls are incredibly fragile, but modern technology using X-rays and computer analysis is finally able to read some of them without physically unrolling them. Ancient texts thought lost forever are being recovered. Pompeii teaches us about Roman architecture, engineering, urban planning, the water system, the road construction, the amphitheater design. It's all there, preserved in place. We can walk through a Roman city and see exactly how it functioned. We can stand in someone's house and see where they cooked, where they slept, where they entertained guests. But the most powerful thing Pompeii teaches is simpler and more affecting. It's that disaster doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Those 15,000 people living in Pompeii on August 23rd had no idea their time was measured in hours. They had plans, they had futures they expected to live, and then they didn't. Every person whose remains have been found in Pompeii was a complete human being. They had thoughts, feelings, relationships, dreams, fears, joys, sorrows. The woman found wearing gold jewellery. Who was she? Was she wealthy, used to fine things, or was she someone who'd saved for years for one beautiful piece? We'll never know. The children found huddled with adults. What were their names? What games did they like to play? What made them laugh? The man found at the city gate with money in his pockets, was he trying to flee? Was he going to make it? What was he thinking in those last moments? We know some names from inscriptions and graffiti. Marcus Fesonius Primus owned a house. Aulus Umbricius Scaurus made fish sauce. Stephanus owned a laundry, but most are anonymous. They're identified by where they were found. The garden fugitives, the man at the gate, the child in the atrium, reduced to their location at death, but they were people, as real and complex as you are. They woke up on August 24th thinking about ordinary things, whether they'd successfully haggle for a better price at the market, whether that person they liked would notice them, whether their children were feeling better, whether the weather would hold. The same kinds of things you might think about on any ordinary day, because it was an ordinary day until it wasn't. Vesuvius is still there, still looming over Naples and the surrounding area. Over 3 million people live in the red zone, the area that would be affected if Vesuvius erupts again, and it will erupt again. Volcanoes don't erupt once and go dormant forever. Vesuvius has erupted multiple times since 79 AD, most recently in 1944. The next eruption could happen tomorrow. It could happen in 1,000 years. Modern monitoring is extensive. Seismographs track every tremor. Gas emissions are measured constantly. Ground deformation is watched. The Italian government has evacuation plans. The hope is that we'll see an eruption coming with enough time to evacuate everyone. But evacuating 3 million people is not simple. The roads would be instantly gridlocked. Panic would be inevitable, and volcanoes don't always give much warning. Sometimes they wake up fast. The people living there know the risk. They choose to stay because it's home, because the land is fertile, because moving isn't simple, because disaster might not happen in their lifetime. It's the same calculation people make in earthquake zones, hurricane-prone areas, flood plains. You accept the risk because life has to be lived somewhere. The same calculation the people of Pompeii made, the same assumption that tomorrow will be like today, that the mountain that's been quiet for longer than anyone can remember will stay quiet, that life will continue. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Walking through the ruins of Pompeii today is a strange, affecting experience. It's a city, but it's also a graveyard, a museum, but also a monument. The streets are empty now, except for tourists and archaeologists. But if you let yourself imagine, you can almost hear it. The noise and chaos and life that filled these streets 2,000 years ago. You can stand in someone's house and see the room where they ate, where they slept, where they received guests. You can see the paintings they chose for their walls, the garden they tended, the furniture impressions in the floors. You can see their lives, or the physical remnants of their lives, and you can see where they died. Some of the casts are still in place where they were found, still in the houses, still in the positions they fell. Permanent reminders that all those ordinary lives ended in darkness and terror and heat. It makes you think about your own assumptions about tomorrow, the plans you're making, the things you think will matter. How much of it would matter if you knew your time was measured in hours? Not that you should live every day like it's your last, because that's exhausting and impractical. The people of Pompeii weren't living in heightened awareness of mortality. They were just living, being human. But maybe there's value in appreciating the ordinary, the fact that you woke up this morning without a mountain exploding, that you have clean water and don't have to walk to a fountain, that you know what a volcano is and what to do if one threatens, that you can make plans with reasonable expectation of seeing them through. The people of Pompeii couldn't, through no fault of their own, through no failure of planning or wisdom. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. A mountain woke up, and 15,000 ordinary lives became a moment frozen in time, a cautionary tale, a memorial to human fragility. Their city is still there. About 2/3 has been excavated. About 1/3 remains buried because archaeology is slow, expensive, and there's value in leaving some for future techniques to uncover. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Millions visit every year. They walk the streets, see the houses, marvel at the art, learn about the daily life, and they see the casts. You can't go to Pompeii and not be affected by those frozen moments of death. They're too human, too real. Too much a reminder that ordinary people going about an ordinary day were about to have their world shattered in the most catastrophic way imaginable. So that's what life was really like in Pompeii. Not the movie version with heroic escapes and dramatic speeches. Not the sanitized museum display with pretty mosaics. The real, complex, mundane, fascinating, brutal, ordinary existence of a Roman city in 79 AD. People living their lives, making their plans, having their dramas and joys and sorrows, right up until the moment they didn't anymore. You've made it through tonight's journey into Pompeii, through the streets and houses and lives of people who lived 2,000 years ago but were fundamentally just like you. Hopefully you've gained appreciation for the simple fact that you woke up this morning without a volcano on the horizon, that your biggest concerns are probably not whether the mountain will explode today, but also hopefully you've gained perspective on how similar those Romans were to us. They weren't alien or primitive. They were people, complex, flawed, dreaming, ordinary people who happened to live in a different time, in a city that happened to be next to a volcano that happened to wake up. Their city is still there, still teaching us. Their stories, or what we can piece together of them, are still being told. And in a strange way, they're still there too, preserved in ash and plaster, reminders of what was and what can be lost in a moment. Thanks for joining me on this journey tonight. If you enjoyed this dive into ancient Pompeii, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to explore next. There are so many stories out there, so many lives lived and lost and remembered. Now get some rest, you've earned it. Tomorrow morning you'll wake up and it will be an ordinary day, and that's something worth being grateful for. Sleep well. Good night. The water system is impressive, but it's also a perfect example of Roman practicality mixing with Roman inequality. That fountain on your street corner, the water coming out of it is fresh and cold and safe to drink. But the fountain itself becomes a social hub. Women gather there to fill water jugs, to gossip, to see and be seen. It's one of the few public spaces where women of different social classes mix regularly. Slaves sent to fetch water for their household stand next to free women doing the same for theirs. But there's no sewage system that matches the water supply. The latrines, the public toilets, do exist. They're communal affairs, long stone benches with holes cut in them, positioned over channels that water flows through. You sit next to other people, sometimes a dozen or more people, all using the facility at once. There's no privacy. There's no toilet paper. You use a sponge on a stick, a torsorium, that sits in a channel of running water. You use it, rinse it, and leave it for the next person. Think about that. Shared sponges. The smell is managed by the flowing water underneath, but it's still a latrine serving hundreds of people daily. Romans burn incense and perfume to mask odours, but there's only so much that can do. And these public facilities are for people out and about in the city. At home, most people use chamber pots that get emptied into the street or into cesspits. The wealthy have slightly more sophisticated arrangements, but it all ultimately goes into the ground or the street channels. Here's where it gets darker. Those beautiful streets with the stepping stones. The large gaps between the stones are sized specifically to let cartwheels pass through, but they also serve another purpose. The channels between them need to be deep enough to handle the flow of waste. During heavy rains, it all washes toward the city gates and out. But in the dry summer months, which is most of the year in Campania, the waste sits and concentrates and repens in the sun. There's a reason why wealthy Romans wear shoes with thick soles and why everyone wears shoes outside. The streets are not clean. You're stepping over and around filth constantly. The slaves who empty chamber pots at night, the ones who collect waste from latrines, they're the lowest of the low in social status. Nobody wants that job, which means it falls to those with absolutely no choice. Let's talk about politics, because Pompeii in 79 AD is actually in an interesting political moment. This is municipal politics, small scale, but intensely personal. The city is governed by a council, the Ordo Decurionum, made up of former magistrates who serve for life. Every year, the citizens vote for new magistrates. There's 2 Doumviri, who are the chief magistrates, like mayors. There's 2 aediles who handle public works, markets, and games. The elections are serious business. Candidates campaign. They have supporters who paint endorsements on walls throughout the city. These aren't subtle. Vote for Gaius Julius Polybius for Doumvir. He'll provide excellent bread. The mule drivers support Gaius Gavius Rufus for Aedile. All the late drinkers support Marcus Cyrenius Vetia for Aedile. Yes, really. The late-night bar crowd endorsed their candidate on a wall. There's also more personal endorsements. Lucius Papidius Secundus, his grandmother, supports him. Taylor Verus supports Holconius Priscus. These are real inscriptions found in Pompeii. The personal nature of small-town politics is on full display. Everyone knows everyone. Your reputation matters. If you want support, you need to have provided for the city. You've sponsored games. You've donated money for a public building. You've provided food during a shortage. But here's the catch. Only adult male citizens can vote. Women can't vote. Slaves can't vote. Freedmen can vote but face social prejudice. The political class is a closed system that perpetuates itself. The same families hold power generation after generation. Social mobility exists, but it's limited and requires either massive wealth or exceptional circumstances. The penalty for corruption or incompetence can be severe. If you mismanage public funds, you can be exiled. If you're convicted of electoral fraud, you lose your status and possibly your property. The stakes are high because your entire family's standing depends on your political career. A scandal doesn't just hurt you, it stains your children, your grandchildren, your whole family line. Religion in daily life is everywhere, but it's not like modern Western religion. There's no weekly service, no religious text you study, no faith in the sense of believing despite lack of evidence. Roman religion is transactional. You give offerings to the gods, you perform the proper rituals, and in exchange, the gods provide favour. Don't hold up your end, and bad things happen. Every home has a lararium, a household shrine. It's usually a small painted niche or a dedicated structure in the atrium or garden. Inside there's images or small statues of the lares, the household gods who protect the family. There's also the genius of the household, the protective spirit of the paterfamilias, the male head of household. You make offerings daily: food, wine, incense. Before meals, you might throw a bit of food into the hearth fire as an offering. There's also private devotion to various gods depending on your occupation and interests. Merchants might honour Mercury, god of commerce and thieves. Prostitutes honour Venus. Gladiators honour Mars. It's pick and choose based on what you need. You can honour as many gods as you want. In fact, honouring more is safer. You don't want to offend a god by neglecting them. Superstition runs deep. Omens are taken seriously. A bird flying in an unusual pattern, a strange dream, an unexpected sound. All these can be interpreted as messages from the gods. There's professional augurs who read omens from bird flight, from the entrails of sacrificed animals, from lightning strikes. Before major decisions, whether it's a battle or a business deal or a marriage, you consult the omens. Magic is real to Romans, which is to say they believe it works. Curse tablets are common. If someone wrongs you, you can pay to have a curse written on a thin lead sheet, calling on gods or spirits to punish your enemy. These tablets are then left at temples or thrown into wells. Archaeologists have found hundreds of them throughout the Roman world. May his limbs be twisted. May she lose her beauty. May his business fail. People genuinely believe these work. Amulets and lucky charms are everywhere. The phallus is considered a protective symbol against the evil eye. You see phalluses carved over doorways, hung as wind chimes, worn as pendants. It's not sexual in the way modern Western culture would interpret it. It's protective magic. Houses have phalluses, shops have phalluses, bakeries have them built into their ovens. The workday in Pompeii starts early and ends early. Most businesses open at dawn and close by early afternoon. The hottest part of the day is when many people take a break, retreat into the cooler interior of their homes or shops, maybe nap. Then activity picks up again in the late afternoon when the temperature drops. Work is specialised. There's over 30 different bakeries in the city, each with massive stone mills turned by donkeys walking in circles. The grain is poured into the top of the hourglass-shaped mill. The donkey walks, the stones grind, flour comes out the bottom. The donkeys wear blinders and sometimes muzzles because they'll eat the grain given the chance. The work is constant, dusty, loud. The donkeys are worked until they can't work anymore, then they're replaced. The fulleries are fascinating in their awfulness. To clean clothes, fullers soak them in large vats filled with water mixed with alkaline substances. Urine, as mentioned before, but also certain types of clay and plant-based detergents. Workers then trample the clothes with their bare feet, stomping for hours to work the cleaning agents through the fabric. Then the clothes are rinsed, stretched, brushed, treated with sulphur smoke to bleach them white if needed. It's intensive labour that leaves the workers reeking of chemicals and urine, with feet perpetually wrinkled and soft from constant moisture. Workshops line the streets, metal workers hammering bronze and iron, potters throwing clay on wheels, painters mixing pigments, carpenters sawing and planing. The noise is incredible. Every workshop is open to the street, so the sounds and smells pour out constantly. The blacksmith's forge radiates heat you can feel from across the street. The tannery smells like death and chemicals because curing leather involves flesh and urine and lime. Commerce is face-to-face and loud. Shopkeepers shout about their goods. Customers haggle over prices. There's no fixed pricing for most things. Everything is negotiable. The merchant quotes a price. You counter with a lower one. You meet somewhere in the middle. It's expected. If you pay the first price offered, you're a fool and everyone knows it. Money is coins, obviously. No paper currency, no checks, no credit cards. You carry your coins in a pouch and hope you don't get robbed. Coins are silver or bronze or occasionally gold if you're wealthy. They're stamped with the emperor's face on one side, various symbols and gods on the other. The weight matters as much as the denomination because the metal itself has value. Clipped coins, ones where someone shaved metal off the edges, are common and everyone checks coins carefully. Large transactions might be conducted at a bank, an argentaria. The banker, the argentarius, handles deposits, loans, currency exchange. Interest rates are high by modern standards, but credit is available if you have collateral. Fail to pay back a loan and you lose whatever you put up. Sometimes that's your business, sometimes it's your home, sometimes it's you, sold into slavery to cover the debt. Night falls, and Pompeii changes. The respectable people retreat to their homes. The streets become more dangerous. There's no street lighting beyond what oil lamps in windows provide. The moon and stars are all you get, and on cloudy or moonless nights, the city is profoundly dark. Walking around at night without a torch or lantern is asking for trouble. Taverns and bars stay open late, catering to people drinking, gambling, looking for company. These establishments have a reputation. They're not where respectable people go, though respectable men might sneak in. The wine is cheaper and more likely to be watered down or adulterated. The food is questionable. The company is rougher. Prostitution is legal and common. Brothels, called lupanaria, exist throughout the city. The one that archaeologists found most intact is small, cramped, with tiny rooms barely big enough for a narrow bed. The walls are painted with explicit frescoes showing various sexual acts, likely serving as a menu for customers who might not speak Latin. The beds are stone platforms with thin mattresses. Above each doorway there's graffiti, often customers bragging about their conquests or prostitutes noting their earnings. The women working there are slaves or desperately poor free women. They have no choice, no other options. The pay is minimal. The conditions are degrading. Disease spreads easily. There's no protection against pregnancy beyond crude and often ineffective methods. Infanticide of unwanted babies is common throughout the Roman world, though not spoken about openly. Sexual morality in Rome is complex and often hypocritical. It's acceptable for men to have sex with slaves, prostitutes, or each other, as long as they're in the dominant role. It's not acceptable for male citizens to be in the submissive role, as that's seen as feminine and shameful. Women are expected to be virgins until marriage and faithful after. Double standards run deep. Marriage among the elite is political and economic. You marry to form alliances between families, to merge wealth, to produce legitimate heirs. Love might develop, but it's not required or expected. Arranged marriages are the norm. Girls marry young, often in their early to mid-teens, to older men. The age gap is just how it's done. Among the lower classes, marriages are simpler but still practical. You marry someone who can help support a household. A baker's son marries a baker's daughter because they understand the business. You need someone who can contribute to the household economy. Romantic love exists, but survival is more important. Divorce is legal and relatively straightforward, at least for men. You can divorce your wife for adultery, for not providing children, basically for any reason if you're determined. Women can initiate divorce too, but it's socially harder and economically dangerous. If you divorce, you usually return to your father's household if he's still alive. Your children stay with their father. You get your dowry back if the divorce isn't your fault, but proving that is complicated. Crime happens constantly. Theft is everywhere. Pickpockets work the crowded forum. Burglars break into houses at night. Highway robbery is common enough outside the city that travelling any distance requires planning and often armed guards. The punishment for theft varies based on the value stolen and your social status. A slave stealing a loaf of bread might be beaten or branded. A citizen stealing significant money might be exiled or enslaved. Violence is handled case by case. If you kill someone in a fight, the outcome depends on who the person was, whether witnesses agree you were defending yourself, and how good your legal representation is. The wealthy can afford skilled lawyers who know how to work the system. The poor get whatever justice they can afford, which often isn't much. There's no police force in the modern sense. The aediles are responsible for public order, but they don't patrol the streets. They handle complaints after the fact. For immediate problems, you either defend yourself or you rely on your patron, that wealthier citizen you've attached yourself to. He has enough status and resources to make problems go away, at least sometimes. At night, there's the vigils, the watchmen, but they're mostly concerned with fire, which is a constant danger in a city built largely of wood and plaster with open flames everywhere. A fire in one building can spread and take out a whole block. The vigiles have buckets, axes, hooks for pulling down burning structures. They're not exactly firefighters in the modern sense, but they're the closest thing Pompeii has. Let's talk about death, because Romans think about it constantly. Life expectancy being what it is, death is not abstract or distant. It's immediate and present. You've probably lost siblings. You've definitely lost friends. You might have lost a spouse or children. Infant mortality is somewhere between 20 and 40% depending on whose estimates you trust, meaning that between 1 in 5 and 2 in 5 babies don't survive their first year. If you die in Pompeii, your body must be buried or cremated outside the city walls. It's religious law. The dead are polluting. They belong outside the space of the living. So outside each city gate there's necropolises, cities of the dead. The tombs line the roads leading away from the city. Some are simple markers, others are elaborate monuments. The wealthy build impressive tombs because your tomb is your final statement of status. It's how you'll be remembered. Some tombs are small buildings with space inside for cremation urns. Others are just carved stones with inscriptions. The inscriptions are revealing. Here lies Gaius Vestorius Priscus, who died at age 22. To the eternal memory of my beloved wife. You who pass by, stop and read what I have to say. Cremation is more common than burial in this period. Your body is burned on a funeral pyre. The ashes and bone fragments are collected and placed in an urn. The urn goes in a niche in the family tomb. There's a funeral feast, a memorial service where family and friends gather to remember you. If you're wealthy, you might have gladiator games held in your honour. But the process of dying, especially from disease, is brutal. Pain management is limited. Comfort care is minimal. If you get seriously ill, if you develop an infection, if you suffer a catastrophic injury, you probably die, and you probably die badly. Gangrene kills slowly and agonizingly. Infected wounds turn septic. Fevers burn until you're delirious. Pneumonia drowns you in your own lungs. Cancer grows unchecked. People do survive sometimes. Broken bones heal, though often poorly, leaving you with a limp or a crooked arm. Some wounds close up, some fevers break. But the mortality rate for serious medical events is astronomically high compared to modern standards. You get sick, you might die. That's just understood. Children are especially vulnerable. Diarrheal diseases, respiratory infections, malnutrition, accidents. Parents in Pompeii have to live with the understanding that any of their children might not survive to adulthood. Some families lose multiple children. It's heartbreaking and absolutely common. We should talk about the earthquakes because they're the warning nobody heeds. In 62 AD, 17 years before the eruption, Pompeii was hit by a massive earthquake. The entire region shook, buildings collapsed, people died, the damage was extensive, the Forum was wrecked, the Temple of Jupiter was destroyed, houses throughout the city cracked and fell. The rebuilding took years. In fact, by 79 AD, some of the repairs still aren't finished. The Temple of Jupiter is still under reconstruction. Some houses still have damaged walls or temporary repairs. The earthquake was devastating, but Pompeii recovered. They rebuilt. They moved on. Because what else can you do? What the people of Pompeii don't know is that the earthquake was directly related to Vesuvius. The same geological forces that create volcanoes create earthquakes. The magma moving deep underground, the pressure building, the fault slipping, it's all connected. That earthquake was the mountain waking up. But nobody makes the connection because nobody understands volcanoes. After 62 AD, there's smaller tremors. The ground shakes occasionally. Not major earthquakes, just little shudders. People get used to it. Oh, another tremor. How annoying. Back to work. It becomes background noise. The new normal. Nobody panics. Nobody evacuates. Why would they? It's just tremors. Here's the really dark part. The tremors are getting more frequent as 79 AD progresses. Modern geologists looking at the evidence believe that in the days and weeks before the eruption, the tremors were happening multiple times per day. People in Pompeii were probably feeling the ground shake regularly, and they just dealt with it. Because they didn't know what it meant, there might have been other signs. Springs and wells changing temperature or drying up completely. animals acting strangely, sulphur smells in the air. But none of this means volcano about to explode to people who don't have that framework. A dry well means you need to dig deeper. A sulphur smell is unpleasant but not alarming. Nervous animals are just nervous. Pliny the Elder, the famous Roman naturalist and military commander, is actually stationed near Pompeii in August 79 AD. He's in Misenum, about 20 miles away across the Bay of Naples. His nephew, Pliny the Younger, is with him. They're going to witness the eruption, and Pliny the Younger will write letters about it that become the only eyewitness accounts we have from someone educated enough to describe it coherently. Pliny the Elder will die trying to rescue people, but we'll get to that. Let's bring this back to daily life in these final days. It's late August. The grape harvest is coming soon. The wine from this year's crop will be highly anticipated. The weather is hot but starting to hint at the fall coolness to come. Kids are playing in the streets, merchants are selling, politicians are campaigning for the upcoming elections. People are making plans. Someone is negotiating a marriage contract, thrilled about the alliance between families. Someone else is arguing with a neighbour about a property dispute, planning to take it before the magistrates. A merchant is excited about a shipment of goods arriving from Egypt. A baker is experimenting with a new recipe. A gladiator in the barracks is training for an upcoming fight, confident he'll win because he always wins. Everyone is living forward into a future they think they have. The young couple planning their wedding next month. The pregnant woman counting down weeks until her baby arrives. The businessman making plans for next year's expansion. The politician strategizing for an election campaign next spring. All these futures that will never happen. It's the ordinariness of it that's haunting. These aren't people preparing for disaster. They're people living normal lives, worried about normal things, happy about normal joys, annoyed by normal frustrations. They're you, essentially, just in a different time with different technology, and they have no idea that their time is measured in days now, not years. The city is alive, fully, completely, chaotically alive. The baths are full of people. The forum is crowded with business and politics. The shops are open and loud. The taverns are serving wine. The brothels are operating. Children are playing. Lovers are meeting in secret. Friends are laughing over dinner. Enemies are plotting revenge. Life is happening at full volume and intensity. And that mountain, Vesuvius, is just there on the horizon. Beautiful, green, peaceful, the source of good soil and good wine, a blessing from Bacchus, a permanent feature of the landscape, as trustworthy and reliable as the sun rising each morning. Nobody's looking at it with worry. Nobody's preparing evacuation plans. Nobody's gathering supplies for an emergency. Because why would they? It's just a mountain. It's always been there. It always will be there. That's what everyone thinks. The confidence is total. Pompeii has survived for centuries. It survived the earthquake in 62 AD and rebuilt. It will survive whatever comes. The city is strong. The people are resilient. They are Romans, for God's sake, the people who conquered most of the known world. A mountain is not a threat. A mountain is just geography. In houses throughout the city, people are going to bed on the night of August 23rd, 79 AD, with absolutely no idea that tomorrow morning will start a sequence of events that will bury their entire city. They're worried about ordinary things, whether tomorrow will be a good day for business, whether the rain will hold off, whether the fish at the market will be fresh, whether their children will behave, whether that person they like will notice them. The last normal night in Pompeii is utterly, completely normal. That's what makes it so tragic. August 24th, 79 AD starts like any other day. The sun rises over the Bay of Naples. The heat builds quickly. People wake up, go about their morning routines. The streets fill with the usual noise and activity. Merchants open their shops. Bakers fire up their ovens. The smell of fresh bread competes with the other smells of the city. It's just another August morning. Except it's not. Because around midday, probably around 1 in the afternoon based on modern analysis, Mount Vesuvius explodes. The initial explosion is catastrophic. The top of the mountain blows off with a force that modern volcanologists estimate was 100,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That's not hyperbole. That's the actual calculation. The explosion is so violent it can be heard hundreds of miles away. From Pompeii, 5 miles from the mountain, the sight is unprecedented and terrifying. A column of ash and pumice shoots straight up into the sky. It rises at hundreds of miles per hour, punching through the atmosphere, reaching heights of 20 miles or more. The column is massive, miles wide, and it just keeps growing, billowing upward like some monstrous tree made of ash and rock. The sound is beyond description. It's not just loud, it's a continuous roar that rattles your bones and makes your ears ring. It's the sound of the earth itself breaking open. People in Pompeii stop what they're doing and stare. Because what else can you do when a mountain explodes? The initial reaction is confusion more than panic. Nobody has a framework for understanding what they're seeing. Some people think it's a thunderstorm forming, though the sky was clear moments ago. Others think the gods are angry, that Jupiter is throwing lightning from an unprecedented storm. A few people, maybe the more educated ones who've read Greek accounts of volcanic activity in other parts of the world, might start to suspect what this actually is. But even they can't comprehend the scale. For the first hour or so, Pompeii is relatively unaffected. The ash column is rising straight up, carried by its own tremendous force. The wind at high altitude is blowing to the southeast, away from Pompeii. The city watches this spectacle, frightened but not yet in immediate danger. Some people start gathering their valuables, preparing to leave. Others stay put, thinking this will pass, whatever it is. Then the column reaches a height where it can't sustain itself anymore. The ash and pumice are too heavy. The column collapses outward, spreading into an umbrella pine shape. Pliny the Younger, watching from Misenum, will describe it as looking like a pine tree, with a straight trunk and spreading branches. It's an apt description that gives this type of eruption its modern name, a Plinian eruption. And now the wind patterns start to matter desperately, because the spreading ash cloud is being blown southeast, directly toward Pompeii. The first pumice stones start falling on Pompeii around mid-afternoon. They're small at first, pebble-sized, white or light grey. Lapilli, the Romans will call them. Little stones. They patter down like strange hail, bouncing off roofs, landing in the streets. People look up, confused, as these rocks fall from the sky. Then they get bigger, and they keep falling, and they don't stop. Pumice is volcanic rock filled with gas bubbles, so it's light for its size, but it's still rock. A piece the size of your fist weighs something, and they're falling by the thousands, by the millions, a continuous rain of stone from the sky. The accumulation starts immediately. Within an hour, there's inches of pumice piling up in the streets. Within 2 hours, it's a foot deep, and it just keeps coming. The temperature drops as the ash blocks out the sun. Pompeii goes from bright summer afternoon to twilight, then to a darkness punctuated only by the glow from the mountain and whatever lamps people can light. The ash in the air makes breathing difficult. It's gritty, dry, and it gets into everything. Your eyes water, your throat feels scratchy, you're coughing constantly. Now people start to panic. The pumice is accumulating fast enough that it's becoming dangerous. Roofs are not designed to hold this much weight. You can hear buildings collapsing throughout the city as roofs cave in under tons of pumice. If you're inside a building when the roof collapses, you're crushed or buried. So do you stay inside or run outside? It's an impossible choice. Stay inside and risk being crushed when the roof caves in. Go outside and get pelted by rocks falling from the sky, and risk being hit by something large enough to crack your skull. There's no good option. Some people make the decision to flee. They grab what they can carry, maybe some food, definitely their money and valuables, and they head for the city gates. The roads out of Pompeii quickly become clogged with people, carts, animals. Everyone is trying to leave at once. The pumice is knee-deep now in places, making walking difficult. It's like trying to run through deep snow, except the snow is made of sharp rocks. The people fleeing have to make another terrible choice. Which direction? The eruption is to the north, so heading south makes sense. But the wind is blowing southeast, which means the ash and pumice are falling thickest on the southern and eastern parts of the city, and the roads leading that direction. Some people head for the harbour, thinking they can escape by sea. Others head inland, trying to get away from the coast. But here's the cruel reality. The pumice is falling over a huge area. It's not just Pompeii. The whole region is being buried. The neighbouring towns of Herculaneum, Stabiae or Plontis, they're all being hit. The farms in the countryside are being buried. The roads are becoming impassable. There's nowhere to run that isn't affected. And you're trying to flee in complete darkness through a rain of stones with air that's becoming difficult to breathe, carrying whatever you could grab, probably with your family, maybe with your slaves if they haven't already run off, and you have no idea where you're going or if anywhere is safe. Some people make it. We know this because there's no bodies found for everyone who lived in Pompeii. The city had about 15,000 people. Archaeologists have found about 1,100 bodies so far. That means thousands escaped, but they escaped into a nightmare landscape where multiple cities were being destroyed simultaneously. Others decide to stay in Pompeii. Maybe they don't believe it will get worse. Maybe they're too old or sick to flee. Maybe they're trying to protect their property from looters. Maybe they're just paralyzed by fear and can't make a decision. They retreat into their homes, usually into interior rooms away from outside walls, and they wait for this to stop. The pumice fall continues through the afternoon, through the evening, through the night. 18 hours of continuous volcanic bombardment. The pumice layer keeps building, 3 feet deep, 5 feet, 8 feet. The ground level of Pompeii is rising as the city is buried from the ground up. Buildings are collapsing constantly now. The weight is too much. Wooden beams snap. Stone walls crack and tumble. Interior rooms offer more protection because they're supported by the walls around them, but even those aren't guaranteed safe. The sound of collapses echoes through the darkness. You hear crashes, screams, then silence. The people who stayed in their homes are trapped now. The pumice has piled up against doors and windows. Even if you wanted to leave, you can't. You're sealed in. The air is stale and full of ash that's filtered inside. You're in complete darkness unless you've managed to keep a lamp lit, and the olive oil for lamps is running low. You're with your family maybe, or alone, and you have no idea if this will ever stop. Some people are buried alive in their homes when the roofs finally give way. The pumice pours in through the collapsed ceiling, filling the room, burying anyone inside. It's not a quick death. You're conscious as the pumice fills the space, as it covers you, as it suffocates you. Your last moments are in total darkness. unable to breathe, crushed under the weight of volcanic stone. Others die from the structures collapsing on them. A beam falls and crushes your skull. A wall tips over and pins you. These deaths are quicker, at least. Archaeologists have found skeletons with crushed skulls, with broken bones, showing the violent ways buildings killed their occupants. Around midnight, about 11 or 12 hours into the eruption, something shifts. The pumice fall begins to ease. For the people still alive in Pompeii, this might seem like good news. Maybe it's ending. Maybe they can escape now. Some people do attempt to leave at this point. They dig through the pumice, blocking their doors, emerge into a city that's buried under 10 to 15 feet of volcanic material, and try to find their way out. But the eruption isn't ending. It's entering its second, more deadly phase. What happens next is the result of the eruption column becoming unstable. Parts of it collapse, and when they do, they create something called a pyroclastic surge. This is a ground-hugging avalanche of superheated gas, ash, and rock that races down the side of the volcano at speeds over 100 miles per hour. The temperature inside a pyroclastic surge can exceed 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The first surge reaches Herculaneum, which is closer to Vesuvius than Pompeii, around midnight or 1 in the morning. Herculaneum is buried under 60 feet of material that hardens into rock, entombing the city even more thoroughly than Pompeii. The hundreds of people who fled to boathouses on the beach, thinking they'd escape by sea, are killed instantly by the heat. Their bodies are vaporized and then buried. Pompeii gets hit by multiple pyroclastic surges in the early morning hours of August 25th. These surges are less intense than the ones that hit Herculaneum because Pompeii is farther away, but they're still fatal. The surge is not something you can run from. It moves too fast. It's a wall of superheated ash and gas that hits like a solid thing. The temperature kills you before you can suffocate. Your body's automatic response is to take a deep breath, maybe to scream, and you inhale superheated gas that sears your lungs instantly. Your brain shuts down from the heat. Death comes in seconds, maybe less. The bodies of people caught in the surges are found in characteristic positions. They're curled up, arms and legs drawn in, a phenomenon called the pugilistic attitude. It's not a defensive posture. It's what happens when extreme heat causes muscles to contract. The body draws inward as the muscles tighten from the heat. Some people are frozen in the last actions they were taking. A family huddled together in a room. A man trying to shield his face with his hands. A dog chained up trying to escape, pulling against the chain. These aren't frozen like ice. They're buried and then decomposed, leaving cavities in the hardened ash. When archaeologists pour plaster into these cavities, they get exact casts of the bodies in their final positions. It's these casts that make Pompeii so haunting. They're not abstract remains, they're people. You can see the folds in their clothing, the expressions on their faces, a man's beard, a woman's hairstyle, the teeth in their mouths. They're so detailed and so human that looking at them is almost unbearable. One famous cast is of a man lying on his side, head pillowed on his arm as if he's sleeping. But he's not sleeping, he's dead, killed by heat and toxic gas. Another shows a pregnant woman, her belly swollen, who died trying to shield herself. There's a group cast of a family, adults and children, huddled together in their final moments. They died together in the darkness, not knowing if anyone else in the city had survived. The dog, the one on the chain, that cast is particularly affecting because the dog had no choice. It was chained. It couldn't run. It could only pull against the chain and bark and panic as the surges hit. The cast shows the collar, the chain, the dog's body twisted in terror and pain. Someone's pet left chained when the owner fled or died unable to escape. By dawn on August 25th, about 19 hours after it started, the main phase of the eruption is over. Vesuvius continues to erupt less violently for days afterward, but the catastrophic destruction is complete. Pompeii is buried under about 13 to 20 feet of pumice and ash, depending on the location. Herculaneum is under 60 feet of material that will harden into stone. The cities are gone, simply gone. From the perspective of survivors and people in the region, Pompeii and the other towns have been erased. The landscape has changed. Where there were cities, there are now fields of grey ash and pumice. The coastline has shifted because of all the material that flowed into the sea. The river valleys are filled in. The survivors, the ones who made it out before the worst hit, they're scattered. They've lost everything. Their homes, their possessions, their businesses, often their family members. Some have burns. Many have respiratory problems from breathing ash. They're refugees in nearby cities that are also dealing with ashfall and damage. The Roman government responds because that's what Rome does. The Emperor Titus, who's only been emperor for about 2 months at this point, sends aid, money for relief efforts, officials to coordinate rescue and recovery. But there's not much to rescue. The cities are buried too deep. Digging out Pompeii would require moving millions of tons of volcanic material. It's not practical. It's not attempted. Some people come back to where Pompeii was and try to dig down to their houses to retrieve valuables. You can see evidence of these tunnels in the archaeological record. People dug down through the pumice, trying to find their homes, their money, their precious objects. Some succeeded. Most didn't. The city was too deeply buried. For the Romans, Pompeii becomes a cautionary tale and then a memory and then mostly forgotten. Other disasters happen. Other concerns take priority. The buried cities fade from common knowledge. People know something happened at Vesuvius in 79 AD. Pliny the Younger's letters preserve an educated eyewitness account, but the exact location of Pompeii is lost over time. Centuries pass. The Roman Empire falls. The landscape changes more. Earthquakes, erosion, construction, agriculture. The region is inhabited continuously, but the people living there don't know they're living above a buried city. Pompeii becomes legend, then myth, then almost forgotten entirely. It's not until 1748 that serious excavation begins, and even then, it's not systematic archaeology in the modern sense. It's treasure hunting, basically. Wealthy collectors and the King of Naples want ancient art and artifacts. They dig into what turns out to be Pompeii and start pulling out frescoes, statues, mosaics, anything valuable or beautiful. The context is destroyed. The scientific value is lost. It's just looting with official sanction. But as they dig more, as more of the city is uncovered, people start to realize what they're uncovering. This isn't just a ruin. It's an entire Roman city, preserved almost exactly as it was on the day it was buried. The buildings are still standing, the streets are still paved, the paintings on the walls are still bright, and then they start finding the bodies. The excavation of Pompeii becomes more scientific over time, especially after the mid-1800s, when archaeology becomes a real discipline. Giuseppe Fiorelli, the director of excavations in the 1860s, is the one who develops the technique of pouring plaster into the voids left by decomposed bodies. Suddenly, the people of Pompeii are visible again, not as skeletons, but as they were in their final moments. What we've learned from Pompeii is incalculable. It's the most complete picture of daily Roman life we have from anywhere. The houses with their frescoes and mosaics show us how Romans decorated. The graffiti shows us how ordinary people wrote and what they thought about. The food preserved in various states shows us what they ate. The tools and household objects show us how they lived. The bodies, both the plaster casts and the skeletons, tell us about health, diet, age, cause of death. Modern analysis of the bones can determine diseases, nutritional deficiencies, even occupational markers like enlarged muscles in bakers from kneading dough. DNA analysis is possible on some remains, telling us about ancestry and population movements. The layers of ash and pumice preserve organic materials that usually decay: wood, fabric, food, papyrus scrolls. One villa near Pompeii had a library of scrolls that were carbonized by the heat. They're fragile beyond belief, but modern technology is finally able to read some of them, revealing texts that were thought lost forever. Pompeii teaches us about Roman architecture, engineering, art, religion, commerce, entertainment, politics, social structure, everything. Because it's not a selection of things that were preserved, it's everything, all at once, from one moment in time. It's like a snapshot of Roman life frozen. But the most powerful lesson from Pompeii is simpler and more human. It's that disaster doesn't announce itself. Those people in Pompeii on August 23rd had no idea that their time was measured in hours. They had plans. They had futures they expected to live. And then they didn't. Every single person in Pompeii that we have a cast of, or skeletal remains of, they were a complete human being with thoughts and feelings and relationships and dreams. The woman found with jewellery, who was she? Was she wealthy, used to fine things? Or was she someone who saved up for one beautiful piece? The children found huddled with adults. What were their names? What games did they play? We'll never know most of their names. Some we do know because of inscriptions or because historical records mention them. But most are anonymous. They're just the garden fugitives, or the man at the gate, or the child in the atrium. They're reduced to their location and position at death. But they were people. They were as real and complex as you are. They woke up that morning thinking about ordinary things: breakfast, work, whether it would rain, whether they'd see that person they liked, whether they'd successfully argued their point in the forum yesterday, whether their child was feeling better, whether the wine shipment would arrive on time, the same thoughts you might have on any ordinary day, because it was an ordinary day, until it wasn't. Vesuvius is still there, still looming over Naples and the surrounding area. Over 3 million people live in the red zone, the area that would be affected if Vesuvius erupts again, and it will erupt again. Volcanoes don't erupt once and then go dormant forever. Vesuvius has erupted many times since 79 AD. The last major eruption was in 1944. The next one could be tomorrow, or it could be 1,000 years from now. We have better monitoring now. Seismographs track every tremor. Gas emissions are measured. Ground deformation is watched carefully. The idea is that we'll see an eruption coming in time to evacuate. But evacuating 3 million people is not a simple task, and volcanoes don't always give much warning. The people of the region know this. They live with it. The same way people live in earthquake zones or hurricane-prone areas or on floodplains. You accept the risk because it's home, because the land is good, because moving isn't simple, because disaster might not happen in your lifetime. The same calculation people in Pompeii made, the same assumption that tomorrow will be like today, that the mountain that's been quiet for longer than anyone can remember will stay quiet, that life will continue. Sometimes it does. sometimes it doesn't. Walking through Pompeii today is a strange experience. It's a city, but it's also a graveyard, a museum, but also a monument. The streets are empty now, just tourists and archaeologists, but if you let yourself imagine, you can almost hear it. The noise and chaos and life that filled these streets, the merchants shouting, the carts rumbling, the conversations and arguments and laughter. You can stand in someone's house and see the room where they ate, where they slept. You can see the furniture impressions, the paintings they chose to decorate their walls, the garden they tended. You can see their lives, or at least the physical remnants of their lives, and then you can see where they died. Because some of the casts are still in place where they were found, still in the houses, still in the positions they fell, still there, frozen, permanent reminders that all those ordinary lives ended in terror and darkness and heat. It makes you think about your own life, doesn't it? Your own assumptions about tomorrow, the plans you're making, the worries you have, the things you think will matter. How much of it would matter if you knew your time was measured in hours? That's not to say live every day like it's your last, because that's exhausting and impractical. People in Pompeii weren't living every day in heightened awareness of mortality. They were just living, getting annoyed at traffic, arguing about politics, enjoying dinner, missing people, looking forward to things, being human. But maybe there's something to be said for appreciating the ordinary. The fact that you woke up this morning, that you have water to drink and food to eat, that you're not worried about a mountain exploding, that you can make plans with reasonable expectation of being alive to see them through. The people of Pompeii couldn't. Through no fault of their own, through no failure of planning or preparation, they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And a mountain woke up. Their city is still there, partially excavated, about 2/3 uncovered with 1/3 still buried because archaeology is slow and expensive, and there's value in leaving some of it for future techniques to uncover. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Millions of people visit every year. They walk the streets, see the houses, look at the art, read about the daily life, and they see the casts. They always see the casts. Because you can't go to Pompeii and not be affected by those frozen moments of death. They're too human, too real, too much a reminder that all those ordinary people going about their ordinary day were about to have their ordinariness shattered in the most catastrophic way imaginable. So that's what life was really like in Pompeii, not the movie version with heroic escapes and dramatic speeches, not the sanitized museum display with pretty mosaics and impressive architecture. The real, complex, mundane, fascinating, brutal, ordinary life of a Roman city in 79 AD. People living their lives, making their plans, having their dramas and joys and sorrows, right up until the moment they didn't anymore. You've made it through tonight's journey into Pompeii, through the streets we've walked together, through the baths and forums and houses and lives of 15,000 people who didn't know they were living on borrowed time. Hopefully you've gained a new appreciation for the simple fact that you woke up this morning without a volcano on the horizon, that you can turn on a faucet and get clean water, that you know what a volcano is and what to do if one threatens. But also hopefully you've gained some perspective on how similar those people were to you. They weren't ancient Romans from a history book. They were people, complex, flawed, dreaming, ordinary people who happened to live 2,000 years ago in a city that happened to be next to a volcano that happened to wake up. Their city is still there, teaching us. Their stories, or what we can piece together of them, are still being told, and in a strange way, they're still there too, preserved in ash and rock, reminders of what was and what can be lost. Thanks for joining me on this journey tonight. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what topic you'd like to explore next. There's so much history out there, so many stories, so many lives lived and lost and remembered. Now get some rest, you've earned it, and tomorrow morning you'll wake up and it will be an ordinary day. And that's something to be grateful for. Good night.